There's hydrogen and helium, then lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon everywhere, nitrogen all through the air with oxygen so you can breathe, and fluorine for your pretty teeth, neon to light up the signs, sodium for salty times, magnesium.
Good morning. I hope you're doing well today. Are you ready for science class? I hope so. Take out your science papers. We're on these pages here. Page 29, page 30, and page 31. Okay. Well, if you were here on Thursday, we talked about the different ways that a caterpillar changes. Well, today we're going to talk about the ways that a lot of insects change. Because this week we're going to be learning a whole lot of things about insects, and I'm going to give you some words. And these words will be the words that are on your test on Friday. Now, the test on Friday is going to be a little bit different because there are some very big words in our science lesson this week that you've probably never heard before. So on Friday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a test. This test, it will have a list of words on one side and a list of definitions on the other side. And I'll just have you draw a line from one side to the other. Okay? There won't be very many. But because there are some big words, it'll be a little hard. It might be a little harder to remember them, especially if you're not an English speaker. So we're going to go through these things this week. We're talking about insects, and you'll have these on your test on Friday. All right. Now, on Thursday we talked about how a caterpillar grows up. Now we're going to talk about how insects grow up, and a lot of this we've already talked about. But we want to talk to you today about the different ways that insects look. Now, on Thursday, I showed you a caterpillar and said that grows up to be a butterfly. It took a very, very long time for people to realize that a caterpillar was a baby butterfly because they don't look the same, do they? It took very smart people to go out, find these animals, find these insects, and look at them, study them, write down what they learned about them, and try to make guesses about what was going to happen to them, like we talked about back when we started this school year on science. On your paper there, you can see again the different life stages of a butterfly, the different shapes that the butterfly goes through to become a butterfly. And here's our first word for this week. That word is metamorphosis. And some of you just looked at that and went, don't be scared. Okay, do not be scared. Metamorphosis, I'm going to make this easy for you, okay? Metamorphosis is when an animal changes as it grows older. Okay. Metamorphosis is when an animal changes as it grows older. On your paper there, you can see a little caterpillar being born out of an egg. That's stage 1. The mama caterpillar lays some eggs, and those eggs, well, mama caterpillar, the butterfly rather, I'm sorry. Mama butterfly lays some eggs, and little caterpillars come out of those eggs. So the egg is where it starts. So it's an egg. Then the egg hatches, and it grows on to number 2. It becomes a caterpillar. You remember what that word for that was? The word for that was larva. It was a larva. Then, when it's time for the caterpillar to change, it built itself a little house called a cocoon or a chrysalis. And there it is a pupa. Remember that? A pupa. And then when it's all ready, that chrysalis breaks open, and you get your butterfly. And now you can see the difference between the butterfly here and the caterpillar here. They don't look anything alike, do they? That's why for a long time people did not know that caterpillars were baby butterflies. And it took a very smart man to show where these butterflies and other things came from. And you can read his story in the rest of the papers. I'm just going to go through here real quick. It used to be believed, and I talked about this on our earlier in this school year, it used to be that scientists thought that you could get living stuff from not living stuff. They thought that rats, they didn't know they came from baby rats. They thought that rats were made by taking an old washcloth and putting some wheat on it, and that suddenly, when you weren't looking, it would turn into a rat. They thought that frogs, they didn't know that frogs came from eggs, they thought that frogs came from mud. They didn't know that flies came from baby flies. They thought that flies came from meat. And it took a very smart man to prove that you can't take something that is not alive and turn it into something that is alive. And his name, as you can see there in your paper, was Francesco Redi. And he wanted to prove that you have to have something that's alive in order to get something else that's alive. So here's what he did. As you can see on your paper there, he had 3 jars. And in each jar he put some res, put some meat, some beef. Okay? Because people believed back in his day that flies were made out of meat. So here's what he did. He had 3 jars, like the jars I told you to make your insect zoos out of. Jar number 1, he put some meat in and left the jar open. Jar number 2, he put some meat in and he covered it. But he covered it with something you could see through. And then jar number 3, he put a lid on it. Now, if flies come from meat, that means that every single jar should have flies in it at some point, because flies come from meat. So he left those jars alone. When he came back to look at them, he looked at jar number 1, which was just a jar with some meat in it. It was full of flies. Jar number 2 had no flies in it, but that was the jar that was covered with something you could see through. The flies had come along, they tried to get to the meat inside it, they couldn't get to it, but they had laid their eggs on top of the jar. Jar number 3, the jar that you couldn't see into, had no flies in it. So what does that prove? It proves that flies are not made out of meat, but that mama flies lay their eggs into meat, into bad meat, so that the baby flies have something to eat when they hatch. And so Francesco Redi proved that you have to have something that's alive in order to make something else that's alive. Right? And we call that, here's our second word for today, biogenesis. Again, big word. It comes from 2 words, bio, which means life, and Genesis, which means the beginning. Biogenesis means living things come from other living things. Only life can make life. You can't get something that's alive from something that is not. Okay? This is why science is so important, because it helps us to study and understand the world that is around us. Okay, so just to remind ourselves, there were 2 words I wanted you to learn today. Number 1 was metamorphosis, which means the way that animals change as they grow older. And number 2 was biogenesis, which means only living things can make living things. Okay, there was a lot to get through there today, but it's okay. You don't have to learn everything in there. That's why we have these classes together, so you can learn the most important things. Okay. There will be no science class tomorrow, because tomorrow is a holiday. It's Dia de Independencia. So go out, have fun, enjoy yourself, and I will see you back here on Wednesday.